What if I told you the NFL as you know it never had to exist this way? What if one general manager, sitting in a war room, made a different call? What if one quarterback went to a different city? What if one trade never happened, one draft pick landed somewhere else, one contract got torn up and rewritten? Everything changes. We're not talking small ripples here. We're talking tidal waves. Dynasty collapses. Legends never becoming legends. Super Bowls going to teams that, in our timeline, never sniffed one. Cities that cried in heartbreak, celebrating in the streets instead. For the last 10 years, the NFL has told us one story. But tonight, we're rewriting it. All of it. This is the last decade of football, redrafted, rebuilt, and reimagined from the ground up. And by the time we're done, you're going to look at the real NFL completely differently. Buckle up, because history is about to get rewritten. The dynasty that almost wasn't. Let's start at the very beginning of this 10-year window. The year is 2014. And if you were a football fan, you already know what was coming. The New England Patriots were good. Really good. Bill Belichick was doing what Bill Belichick does. And Tom Brady, already a 3-time Super Bowl winner, was entering what would quietly become the most dominant stretch of quarterbacking in NFL history. But here's the thing nobody talks about enough. The Patriots almost didn't have him. Go back just a few years earlier. Brady was aging. His contract was being renegotiated. There were real, legitimate questions about how many good years he had left. And in an alternate front office, in an alternate timeline, a team decides, you know what, let's move on. Let's trade him while his value is still high. Let's rebuild around youth. Sound crazy? It's not. It happened with Joe Montana. It happened with Brett Favre. Legends get moved. It's football. So let's say the Patriots make that call. Let's say in 2014, Tom Brady is traded. Where does he go? Here's where it gets interesting. The San Francisco 49ers in 2014 were a powerhouse. Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. A defense that was absolutely terrifying. They'd just come off 2 straight NFC championship appearances. But their quarterback situation? Colin Kaepernick had shown flashes but was inconsistent. The front office wasn't fully sold. And behind closed doors, there were real conversations about upgrading at the position. Now drop Tom Brady into San Francisco. Into that offense. Into that defense. Suddenly, the 49ers don't just go to the Super Bowl in 2014. They win it. And they probably win it again in 2015. And now you have a Brady-led dynasty on the West Coast that changes everything. The NFC pecking order, the balance of power, the whole NFL landscape. Seattle, who won Super Bowl 48 in our timeline. They might still get there. But they don't beat Brady's 49ers. The Legion of Boom versus Tom Brady in his prime, with weapons and a defense built to win? San Francisco wins that game. And the Seahawks dynasty gets cut short before it ever really starts. But wait. If Brady's in San Francisco, what happens in New England? Great question. And this is where the alternate timeline gets really wild. Bill Belichick doesn't panic. He never panics. He goes out and he drafts his quarterback of the future. And here's the thing, in the 2014 draft, there's a player sitting there that most teams passed on. A player with accuracy issues and a small school pedigree but an arm and a brain that the Patriots would have loved. What if Belichick, quarterback hungry, moves up and takes Derek Carr? Or better yet, what if he packages picks to get in position for Jimmy Garoppolo a year later? Either way, New England rebuilds. They stay competitive because they're always competitive. But they're not a dynasty anymore. They're just really good. And the entire AFC power structure collapses. Denver. Still good with Peyton Manning in 2014. But without Brady as the annual mountain to climb, Peyton gets one more ring. Maybe 2. His legacy becomes unquestioned. Nobody debates whether he's the GOAT because Brady was never there to challenge him. Indianapolis. With Andrew Luck healthy and developing, and a weaker AFC, the Colts become the team to beat. They go deep. Maybe they even win one. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City. All of them see their windows open just a little wider because the Patriots have shifted from dynasty to contender. Everything downstream of that one Brady trade is different. The draft that changed everything. Now let's talk about the 2016 NFL Draft. Because if you want to find the single moment that shaped the next decade of football more than any other, you start here. Jared Goff. Number 1 overall. To the Los Angeles Rams. Carson Wentz. Number 2 overall. To the Philadelphia Eagles. Two young quarterbacks. Two franchises desperate for a face. Two stories that, in our timeline, ended very, very differently. But here's the question nobody asked loudly enough at the time. What if they got switched? What if the Rams took Wentz and the Eagles took Goff? Now this isn't random. Scouts in 2016 were genuinely split on these two guys. There were real arguments for both at one. It came down to front office philosophy, not some massive talent gap. So this isn't a wild fantasy. This is a coin flip that went one way when it could have gone the other. Put Carson Wentz in Los Angeles with Sean McVay, who takes over as head coach in 2017. Wentz's mobility, his arm strength, his football IQ in McVay's creative offense? That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. McVay's system makes quarterbacks look like geniuses. It made Jared Goff look like a Pro Bowler. What does it do with a guy who actually had Pro Bowl talent? The Rams don't just go to the Super Bowl in 2018. They probably win it. And they probably go back in 2019. Meanwhile, Jared Goff lands in Philadelphia with Doug Peterson. Goff is a system quarterback through and through. He was that way in college, he was that way in the NFL. Peterson's offense was creative and quarterback-friendly. But Goff needed structure. He needed McVay's precision. Without it, he struggles. The Eagles, in our timeline, won Super Bowl 52 with Nick Foles, a backup, after Wentz went down injured. In this alternate world, Goff starts, plays okay, but the Eagles don't have that special something. They're a 7 or 8 win team. They miss the playoffs. And Nick Foles never has his fairy tale moment. One of the greatest backup quarterback stories in NFL history never happens. The underdog magic of that Eagles Super Bowl run, erased. But that's not even the biggest consequence. The biggest consequence is what this does to the NFC. In our timeline, the Rams get good and the NFC gets incredibly competitive. The Packers, Saints, Bears, Vikings, everyone is jockeying for position. Without Goff running the Rams offense with McVay, that team isn't the same threat. The NFC South becomes a bloodbath in a different way. The Saints, with Drew Brees, suddenly have a clearer path. New Orleans doesn't just win one Super Bowl in this decade. They potentially win 2. And Drew Brees retires as an unquestioned champion. No more heartbreak. No more controversial calls. The story of Drew Brees ends the right way. But somewhere in Los Angeles, Carson Wentz is winning rings. And nobody from Philadelphia ever gets to claim him. The fans who loved him, who put his jersey on their kids, who believed he was going to bring a championship to the city of brotherly love, they never get that. The emotion of it. The heartbreak of watching him thrive somewhere else. Feel that. That's what a single draft position does. The year Aaron Rodgers left. This one is going to hurt if you're from Wisconsin. The year is 2018. Aaron Rodgers is coming off an injury-shortened 2017 season. He's frustrated. The Packers roster is aging. There are reports of tension between Rodgers and management. Behind the scenes, things aren't great. In our timeline, the Packers hold it together. They keep Rodgers. They eventually make another playoff run. He wins MVP again in 2020. He stays, sort of, until the drama finally boils over and he leaves for the Jets in 2023. But what if the break happened earlier? What if in 2018, Aaron Rodgers demands a trade? And what if Green Bay, exhausted and realistic, actually grants it? Where does he go? Let's put him in Pittsburgh. Because the Steelers in 2018 were at a crossroads. Ben Roethlisberger was aging. Antonio Brown was imploding. Juju Smith-Schuster was electric. The defense had pieces. And Pittsburgh has a culture of winning, a coaching staff that knows how to maximize quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, with a Real receiving core, with a healthy offensive line, with Mike Tomlin's winning culture? That team goes to 3 straight AFC championship games. Maybe 2 Super Bowls. Rodgers, who never won a second ring in our timeline, finally gets his second. Maybe his third. And Rodgers stops being the wasted talent narrative. That story, the one where analysts talk about how he should have more rings, how the Packers failed him, that story never happens. Because he's winning. He's winning with Pittsburgh. He's happy. He's in his element. Meanwhile, Green Bay has to completely rebuild. They draft Jordan Love anyway, maybe even a year earlier. And Love, thrown into the fire sooner, either develops faster or flames out earlier. There's no comfortable apprenticeship. It's sink or swim. In this timeline, Love struggles initially. Green Bay goes 3-13. They get a top 5 pick. And with that pick, they draft a linebacker, a pass rusher, pieces that actually help Love eventually succeed. By 2023, Green Bay is quietly good again. Not great, but good. Love is solid. But they're not contenders. They're a team you respect but don't fear. And the NFC North? Without the Packers as the perennial giant, Detroit and Minnesota both see their windows crack open. The Lions, already building something real in our timeline, start their rebuild earlier. They make the playoffs sooner. Dan Campbell becomes a legend faster. The NFC North becomes a 4-team race by 2022. Every week matters. Every game is on the edge. That's more exciting, honestly. But we lost something too. We lost the Rodgers-Packers story. We lost the complicated, beautiful, messy relationship between a franchise and its greatest player. That story had grief in it. It had real human drama. And in this alternate world, we traded it for wins and losses. Sometimes the rewrite isn't better. It's just different. Patrick Mahomes and the team that should have drafted him. Let's talk about the most important player of this era. Patrick Mahomes. The most gifted quarterback of his generation. Possibly of all time. The arm talent, the improvisational skill, the competitive fire, there is nobody like him. He went to Kansas City in 2017. 10th overall pick. But here's what you might not remember. 9 teams passed on Patrick Mahomes. 9 teams. The Bears. The 49ers. The Jets. The Browns. The Cardinals. Teams starving for a quarterback. Teams that have been bad for years, sometimes decades, desperately searching for their guy. And they all looked at Patrick Mahomes and said, "Not yet. Not us. We'll pass." So let's rewrite just one of those decisions. Let's say the Browns, who picked first overall in 2017 and took Myles Garrett, also had the 12th pick. In our timeline, they took DeShone Kizer at 19. They were desperate for a quarterback. What if Cleveland, in their desperation, trades up to 9 to grab Mahomes before Kansas City can get him? Stay with me, because this changes everything. Cleveland with Patrick Mahomes. Think about that city. Think about what it means to a fan base that has suffered through decades of misery. The drive. The fumble. The broken promises. The heartbreak. The endless jokes. Now give them the most electric quarterback in football. Hugh Jackson is still the coach in 2017. He's terrible. But Mahomes is too talented to keep down. The team wins more than our version did. 4 wins, maybe 5, instead of 0. They fire Jackson after 2018. They bring in a real coach. Kevin Stefanski, maybe, comes a year or 2 early. By 2020, Cleveland is a legitimate playoff team. By 2022, they're a contender. And the Super Bowls that Mahomes won with Kansas City? Those don't happen. Andy Reid, arguably the greatest offensive mind in NFL history, doesn't have his guy. He retires without a ring. One of football's most respected coaches goes out without the championship he deserved. That's devastating. In a different way. But Cleveland is celebrating. For the first time in their lives, Cleveland fans are celebrating in January. In February. And Kansas City either finds their quarterback elsewhere or they spend a decade being okay but not great. No dynasty. No back-to-back rings. No Mahomes to Travis Kelce. No Taylor Swift in the suite. The cultural moment that the Chiefs created, the dominant team that became a pop culture phenomenon, that never happens. And you realize something uncomfortable. The right outcome for one city is the wrong outcome for the story of football itself. Because the Chiefs dynasty has been genuinely special to watch, even if you hate them. Watching Mahomes operate is watching something rare. Watching Andy Reid finally get his rings was one of the most emotionally satisfying moments in recent NFL history. Take Mahomes away from that situation and you don't just change wins and losses. You lose something beautiful from the sport. That's the cost of redrafting history. Sometimes what feels like justice for one city means grief for the whole game. The Super Bowl that broke an entire city. January 2019. The NFC Championship game. New Orleans Saints versus the Los Angeles Rams. Late fourth quarter. The Saints are about to go to the Super Bowl. Everybody can feel it. Drew Brees is orchestrating. The Superdome is electric in every living room in Louisiana. This is their moment. And then, the hit. The pass interference that wasn't called. The play that robbed New Orleans of a Super Bowl appearance. The moment that NFL fans will argue about until the end of time. In our timeline, the Rams go to the Super Bowl and lose to the Patriots. The Saints go home. Drew Brees never gets another real shot at a ring. He retires in 2020 without one more championship. And that missed call becomes one of the darkest chapters in recent NFL history. But let's give it to them. Let's say the flag gets thrown. Or better yet, let's say that hit simply doesn't happen. The receiver goes out of bounds, or the ball falls incomplete, or Brees throws it somewhere else. New Orleans advances. The Saints versus the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 53. That game. That storyline. Drew Brees versus Tom Brady. The old guard versus the old guard. Two future Hall of Famers in the biggest game on earth. Two of the best teams of the decade. And in New Orleans, in a city defined by music and food and passion and resilience, the whole city holding its breath. Brady is Brady. He's going to make it hard. He always makes it hard. But this Saints team is built to win. They have the running game. They have Michael Thomas, who is in the middle of a historically dominant stretch. They have Sean Payton, one of the most creative coaches in NFL history. This game goes down to the wire. Maybe to overtime. And this time, in our reimagined history, Drew Brees gets the final drive. He drives down the field. 60, 70 yards. Tight windows. Perfect timing. And with 1 minute left, he finds Thomas in the end zone. New Orleans wins. The city erupts. Not just the Superdome. The entire French Quarter. The entire state of Louisiana. A place that had been through Katrina, through rebuilding, through years of coming close and falling short, they finally have it. Drew Brees holds the Lombardi Trophy over his head. And he retires a champion. Not the guy who almost made it. The guy who made it. That story. That ending. The emotional weight of it. That's what the NFL stole from New Orleans with one missed call. And in our alternate history, we give it back. Chapter 6. Joe Burrow and the team that could have broken Cincinnati's curse sooner. The year is 2020. Joe Burrow wins the Heisman. He lights up college football like nobody has in years. He's clearly a franchise quarterback. The Cincinnati Bengals hold the first overall pick. In our timeline, Burrow goes to Cincinnati. He gets hurt his rookie year. He comes back in 2021, takes the Bengals to the Super Bowl in 2022, loses narrowly to the Rams. He becomes a star, a style icon, an icon of his city. But what if he went somewhere else? What if the Bengals, in this alternate world, had made the playoffs in 2019? They wouldn't have had the first pick. What if they were picking 6th, 7th, 8th? And Burrow is gone before they can take him. Where does he land? Let's say Jacksonville. The Jaguars, in a slightly different timeline, hold the top pick. They're in desperate need of a quarterback. Urban Meyer hasn't been hired yet. They bring in someone smarter. They build the roster first, then bring in Burrow. Joe Burrow in Jacksonville, with a competent coaching staff, with the energy of a young team with chips on their shoulder? The Jaguars become relevant. They become interesting. Burrow, who is magnetic and charismatic and driven, becomes the face of a renaissance for one of the NFL's most forgotten franchises. And Cincinnati? Cincinnati gets Trevor Lawrence instead. Because Lawrence, the generational talent from Clemson, drops to them at number 2 or 3. And in this world, Cincinnati builds around Lawrence. Lawrence in Cincinnati, without the disaster of Urban Meyer and the Jaguars destroying his confidence, develops properly. He's good. Really good by year 3. Cincinnati finally breaks their playoff drought, but a year or two later than in our timeline. And Jacksonville, with Burrow, is a contender by year 3. It's a city that starts filling their stadium again. A fan base that was falling asleep starts showing up in gear on Sundays. 2 cities. 2 quarterbacks. Swapped. And both of them are better for it in unexpected ways. Chapter 7. The trade that never happened, and the one that should have. Let's talk trades. Because the NFL's most dramatic moments in this last decade have come from the phone calls nobody expected. First one, the Odell Beckham Jr. trade from the Giants to Cleveland in 2019. In our timeline, this trade happened. It was a blockbuster. Beckham was the most exciting receiver in football. Baker Mayfield was supposed to be the guy. Together, they were going to bring Cleveland back to glory. It didn't work. Beckham was unhappy almost immediately. He and Mayfield had no chemistry. He left after 2 years. The whole thing was a disaster. But what if the trade never happened? Beckham stays in New York. The Giants, rebuilding around him and Daniel Jones, have a real number 1 receiver for their young quarterback to grow with. Jones develops faster because he has a weapon that makes everyone around him better. By 2021, the Giants are a playoff team. By 2022, they're a genuine contender. Meanwhile, Cleveland builds differently. Without the Beckham distraction, Mayfield focuses. He might not be the long-term answer, but the culture in that building is cleaner. The team's cap space, that they would have spent on Beckham's contract, goes elsewhere. They build depth. A better offensive line. Real support. The outcome might not be much different in terms of wins. But the culture, the locker room, those things matter for years after a single season ends. Now the trade that should have happened but didn't. Russell Wilson to the Steelers. Not the Broncos. In our timeline, Wilson got traded to Denver in 2022, and it was one of the most spectacular collapses in recent memory. A quarterback who had been brilliant for a decade looked lost and diminished in a new system with bad coaching and worse play calling. What if Pittsburgh had made that call? Ben Roethlisberger retires and the Steelers, instead of drafting Kenny Pickett, package a massive offer for Wilson. Wilson in Pittsburgh. With Mike Tomlin. With a real offensive line. With a franchise that protects its quarterbacks and gives them structure. Wilson doesn't collapse. Wilson thrives. The Steelers go from a transitional team to an immediate contender. They go to the playoffs in 2022. They go deep in 2023. And Denver avoids one of the most expensive mistakes in league history. They use those picks and cap space wisely. They draft a young quarterback. They build for the future. They don't flush 3 years of relevance down the drain on a mismatch. 2 trades. Both matter enormously. Not just for the teams involved, but for the entire confidence of the league in trusting the process of rebuilding versus swinging for home runs. The NFL keeps teaching the same lesson over and over. Chemistry matters. System matters. Fit matters. And teams keep forgetting it. Chapter 8. The coaches who changed everything. We've talked about players. But coaches shape this game as much as anyone who puts on a helmet. Bill Belichick and the end of an era. In our timeline, Belichick stayed in New England through 2023, had a terrible year, and then parted ways with the franchise. He ended his coaching career without finding a new team, sitting out 2024. It was a strange and deflating ending to the greatest coaching career in NFL history. But in our alternate world, what if Belichick left New England 1 year earlier? What if after the 2022 season, a year where he and Brady had been gone, where the team was clearly declining, he takes a meeting with the Dallas Cowboys? Jerry Jones, Belichick, together. Now, This seems crazy because Jerry Jones loves control. He loves being the smartest person in the room. And Bill Belichick is the single person on earth least likely to let someone else think they're the smartest person in the room. But let's say they find a way. Let's say there's a mutual respect, a shared desperation. Belichick wants one more ring. Jones wants one more ring. They make it work. Dallas with Belichick. Dak Prescott finally has a head coach who knows how to win playoff games. CeeDee Lamb is the best receiver in football and now has a system designed to maximize him. The defense, which already had pieces, gets completely rebuilt by the greatest defensive mind in history. Dallas wins the NFC in 2023. They go to the Super Bowl. They face the Chiefs. Mahomes versus Belichick. The greatest quarterback of this era versus the greatest coach of all time. The immovable object versus the unstoppable force. That game would have broken the internet. That game would have been one for the ages. In our world, we never got it. We got Brady versus Belichick in 2018. But Mahomes versus Belichick in the Super Bowl? That's the game we were owed. Give it to us. In our alternate history, Dallas wins. Belichick gets his 7th ring. Cowboys fans, long-suffering, mocked and dismissed, finally exhale after 30 years of drought. And the NFC going forward is different. Dallas becomes the team to beat. The Eagles, the 49ers, they have a new rival at the top. The NFC becomes a genuine 4-team race every single year. That's good for football. Great for football. Chapter 9. The quarterbacks who deserved better. Let's take a moment to honor the ones who got lost in the chaos. Deshaun Watson. Before the legal troubles that derailed his career, Watson was a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Electric, accurate, competitive. The Texans wasted him. They built nothing around him. They refused to give him control over personnel. They let a franchise talent rot in a dysfunctional environment. In our alternate world, what if Watson demanded a trade before the legal issues? What if in 2020, the Texans move him to a team that actually knows how to build? The San Francisco 49ers, right before the Kyle Shanahan era was fully established, had been using a series of quarterbacks without finding the right one. Jimmy Garoppolo was good but fragile. Watson, healthy and motivated in the right environment, changes that franchise entirely. San Francisco with Deshaun Watson. That offense. That defense. That coach. You're looking at a Super Bowl favorite for 3 straight years. And Houston, forced to rebuild, has the draft capital to do it right. They eventually draft C.J. Stroud, which they did in our timeline, and the trajectory looks similar. Painful but necessary growth. Watson's career doesn't get derailed by dysfunction and desperation and bad decisions. He stays professional. He stays focused. He wins. And somewhere, an entire conversation about his legacy, one of the most complicated and sad in recent NFL history, never needs to happen. Then there's Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a generational talent. He won 2 MVP awards. He changed what it means to be a quarterback in this league. But in our timeline, he's never won a Super Bowl. He's gotten close and fallen short. And there are real questions about whether the Ravens, despite being well run, have done enough around him. In our alternate history, the Ravens in 2019 make a massive investment in offensive weapons around Lamar. They recognize immediately that they have something once in a generation. They don't nickel and dime the supporting cast. Lamar goes to the Super Bowl in 2020. He wins it. He holds that trophy up in February. And the conversation about his legacy is settled permanently and beautifully. Some people need the ending their career has been building toward. Lamar is one of those people. Chapter 10. The Super Bowls we deserved. Let's dream for a minute. Let's talk about the Super Bowls that never happened but should have. The one we deserved. Peyton Manning versus Aaron Rodgers. 2 of the greatest quarterbacks ever, both in their prime, both representing the best of their conferences in a Super Bowl. In our timeline, they never met on the biggest stage. In an alternate 2014, Manning's final great season with Denver, Rodgers leading a vintage Packers team, we get this game. And it is everything. Every moment of it. 2 geniuses at the line of scrimmage, reading defenses, audibling, competing at the highest level. Manning wins. But barely. One possession. In overtime. And he retires immediately after. On top. The final image of Peyton Manning is him holding the Lombardi Trophy, hugging his offensive lineman, face full of joy and exhaustion and completion. Instead of the image we got, a broken Manning hobbling through 2015, carried by a defense, barely functional, we get the perfect ending. The way it should have ended. The one we deserved, the Chargers in the Super Bowl. Philip Rivers. One of the most talented, underappreciated quarterbacks in NFL history. A guy who gave everything to football for 20 years and never made it to the Super Bowl. In our timeline, he retired without one. In an alternate 2018, the Chargers, who had an excellent team that year, make one better decision in the playoff bracket. They beat the Patriots in Foxborough. They face the Saints in the Super Bowl. Rivers versus Breeze. Old friends from the same college. Lifelong competitors who respected each other deeply. In a Super Bowl together. Rivers wins. He finally wins. And he breaks down on the field. Not in a sad way. In the way that only people who have given everything to something for decades can break down when it finally goes right. That image. That moment. We were robbed of it. Chapter 11. What it all means. We've been on a journey. 10 years of NFL history, redrawn and reimagined. Brady in San Francisco. Mahomes in Cleveland. Belichick in Dallas. Drew Brees winning it all. Philip Rivers getting his moment. Lamar Jackson holding the trophy he deserves. And here's what you notice when you step back. The actual history of the NFL in this decade has been extraordinary. We got a genuine dynasty in Kansas City. We watched Tom Brady do things no quarterback has ever done. We watched Patrick Mahomes redefine what genius at the position looks like. We watched the rise of Jalen Hurts and C.J. Stroud and Josh Allen and a generation of quarterbacks who are going to define the next 10 years just like the ones who defined these last 10. The alternate history is fun. It's emotional. It gives people the endings they deserved and the matchups we were owed and the championships that felt like justice. But the real history also gave us things that felt impossible. A 44-year-old Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl in Tampa with a team he'd never played for. Patrick Mahomes leading a comeback nobody thought was possible and then doing it again. The underdog Eagles. The suffering Bills fanbase still believing despite everything. The Lions, the Detroit Lions, finally becoming relevant after 30 years of irrelevance. Reality is stranger than the alternate. Reality surprised us in ways even the best writer couldn't predict. And maybe that's the whole point. Football doesn't care about narratives. It doesn't care about fairness or justice or what we think should happen. It just plays. And the chaos of it, the unpredictability, the heartbreak and the triumph that comes from genuine competition, that's what makes it real. The rewrite is fun. But the original is something else entirely. Epilogue. The next 10 years. Here's the thing about spending time rewriting the past. It makes you hungry for the future. Because right now, today, the next decade of NFL history is being written. Josh Allen is trying to finally get to the top. Lamar Jackson is still chasing what should have been his long ago. Jalen Hurts is building something in Philadelphia. And Patrick Mahomes, already a legend at 30, is trying to become something that doesn't have a name yet. C.J. Stroud just showed us a preview of what he's capable of. Anthony Richardson is a mystery and a promise all at once. Drake May in New England might be the beginning of the next Patriot story. Caleb Williams in Chicago might be the hero that City has been waiting for since the days of sweetness and the monsters of the Midway. The next 10 years could be anything. It could be another dynasty. It could be chaos. It could be a surprise team from a forgotten city who strings together a magical season and shocks the world. It always can be. That's football. So the next time you're watching a game that breaks your heart, the next time a flag doesn't get thrown, or a ball bounces wrong, or a coaching decision costs your team everything, just remember. Somewhere in an alternate history, it went differently. Somewhere, Drew Brees is a double champion. Philip Rivers is crying on the confetti field. The Lions have a dynasty. Peyton Manning got his perfect ending. And somewhere, someone is reimagining our future the same way we just reimagined our past. The story isn't over. It never is.